Hey guys, and welcome to my first ever tier list for Warhammer 3. This is going to be a tier list for the multiplayer domination game mode, and certainly it should be a bucket ton of fun. Now, bear in mind, I've played this game on early access for a couple of weeks now, and I've played against a large group of players, but still, in comparison to when the game is released, it's quite a small sample to take from. I've only done a limited amount of games, so this is also partly speculation on what units, or what factions I should say, will be good in the domination game mode early on, and all of this is subject to massive change within just the next couple of days. When the game comes out, this could all flip on its head, but I think it's always good fun to speculate about factions, where they are in the current meta, what they can do in the future to improve, and so on and so on. And it's always a good, fun discussion in general. So do bear in mind, this is a lot of speculation and kind of just my personal experience with these factions so far. Likewise, I'm better with some factions than I am others because they suit my playstyle better, and this is going to be quite dependent on the player themselves. But here is my personal tier list at the moment for the factions of Total War Warhammer 3 in domination mode, and I'm certainly looking forward to it. It should be some good fun. So let's start with some of the big boys. Let us go with Nurgle. So Nurgle, straight out the gate, a lot of people have said are underpowered, and I certainly disagree with them. Now, do I think they're the best faction in the game? Do I think they're going to be on the S tier? I'll also probably explain that. S tier for me is going to be super OP, like almost unbeatable if played by a player of equal skill to you if they're taking against any other faction. F is garbage, and you can kind of guess the rest here in the middle. A, very good. B, really solid. C, pretty solid. D, a little bit bad. E, pretty bad as well. So Nurgle, how do I think they fare? Well, they are incredibly slow. Incredibly slow. And in this game mode, it seems absolutely pivotal to have speed, but that is actually a little bit of a lie. And I have seen Nurgle dominate tournaments and do really fantastic as well in a load of games I have played. If you take a little look at my first ever tournament live stream, Logic dominated the competition with Nurgle. I think they won every single fight they're up against. I think they have really good matchups up against Kislev. They can hold their own against Khorne, and you simply cannot take on their large single entities and hope to ever kill them. It's just too much of an ask. So they're always going to be good on objectives. If Nurgle get ahead of the game early on, win a big fight at the beginning, and cap an objective or maybe two objectives, they are nigh on unstoppable. However, if they lose that big first fight, if they really struggle, they're not very good at coming back into the game due to that lack of speed and quick damage output. They're not able to get those cost-effective trades, and that's why I think they are decent faction, but certainly not overpowered because they really lack the comeback ability of other hard-hitting factions, such as Zinc and Senesh, for example. So for that, I am going to put Nurgle down here in the C tier, which is pretty damn solid. Certainly not bad whatsoever, but not one of the big main factions which are going to be dominating the scene in the first couple of weeks of domination. Now, very powerful characters in general, decent infantry, decent creatures, and some very nice durability with the healing. But again, very dependent on the early game Nurgle. I haven't seen too many Nurgle comeback games. It's all about kind of the first opening 5 to 10 minutes. And if they're behind by that point, it's certainly going to be quite a struggle for them. Very good though once they get into that position and they can fill in choke points with all their troops and stop the enemy getting onto the objectives. Doesn't matter how large your opponent's army is if it can't get on to those points. So for me, Nurgle in a solid C tier position. Up next, we're going to be taking a look at Zinc. Now, Zinc has been widely considered to be one of the most powerful factions in the game, almost the opposite to Nurgle, at least from what I've seen in the comment sections of people's videos on Zinc, and I have to agree. I think they are one of the best factions in the game, and are certainly a menace to deal with. Their shield mechanic is really quite tasty, and particularly in land battles can make them oppressively OP. I think they might be S tier in land battles, but this is for domination, and they're not quite there. They do have some relatively strong counters from other factions. I think Senesh and Khorne are a real nightmare for Zinc to deal with, and even Kislev can get in there and do the dirty on them. Particularly Khorne though. Khorne is really nasty for Zinc. I didn't see it coming quite so how badly Khorne were going to be a big problem for Zinc, but they do struggle to deal with single entities. Now, if you bring like a giant from Ogres, for example, and one other big lord, yeah, Zinc can burst them down with their long-range power, but if you bring just single entities, such as the Blood Shrine from Khorne, it is a nightmare for Zinc to deal with because they don't have any hard-hitting combat units to try to counteract them. Despite this, Blue Horrors, very cheap infantry. They throw plasma grenades. They're almost like a miners with blasting charges with extra shots and being quite cheap themselves. Fantastic capping utility, and Zinc have something that Nurgle do lack desperately: speed. They're very quick. They can dominate the air as well with Doom Knights, Furies, as well as their Lords. Lovely, powerful casters, and I think magic is going to be pretty huge in this game mode. Big area of effect spells are much harder to dodge in this game mode than it is in standard land battles, because you need a lot more micro, a lot more battle awareness. You're trying to bounce around the map. If you're dealing with something on objective 3, your opponent drops a big vortex on objective 1, you simply cannot dodge it. And for that, I actually need to put in Zinc all the way up here in the A tier as a very powerful faction. Some of the best lords in the game. Big fan of the Exalted Lords of Change. I think they are... I think you've got Metal and the Zinc different varieties. Their other smaller lords are good. The Legendary Lord as well, very, very powerful. And in general, decent infantry. Not the best combat infantry, but some of the best knights in the game in the form of Doom Knights as well as Chaos Knights of Zinc. Because of that shield, they are so durable and tanky, and that allows your ranged supporting units to kind of dominate. So Zinc, very powerful faction, up there in the A tier. I don't think many people are going to complain about that one. Up next, let's take a little bit of a look at Khorne. Now, Khorne, early days, everyone thought was going to be incredibly powerful, and boy, oh boy, are they. They have some stupidly tanky infantry, and it's got a decent amount of variety to it as well. You have the fast, hard-hitting, armor-piercing bloodletters. You have your really solid boys in the form of the Chaos Warriors of Khorne. You have halberds, you have dual weapons. You've got quite a nice troop there, as well as some big, dangerous targets. Skarbrand will 1v1 basically anyone in the game in a straight-up duel. I think an Inkari can kind of cycle charge him to death a little bit. He does lack flying, but then you have the Bloodthirsters, these terrifying large single entities, and Khorne does have some of the best single entities around. They just hit so freaking hard. Lack of healing, though, and lack of magic in particular does hinder Khorne a bit compared to someone like Zinc. I think if Khorne had magic, they would probably be up in the S tier, but because they lack the magic, they don't have the ability to do those big, hard-hitting spells, which we are seeing more and more in domination mode at the moment. They do have some fantastic abilities, where they can bring a giant sword down from the sky, for example, which does some nice work. But alas, you know, that's not going to be too impactful as you can't use it that much in the game. They do have some of the best units in the form of Flesh Hounds of Khorne, which are up there certainly in like the top 5 units in domination at the moment. I may do that as a future video actually, like top 5 units in domination. But Khorne, very powerful, unfortunately lacking magic and therefore lacking a bit of speed with hard-hitting infantry. They have the speed of Chaos Warhounds as well as the Flesh Hounds of Khorne, but I'm going to be putting them in a very, very strong B tier, almost A tier. Like, they're kind of clawing at the A tier door. B+++++, or even A- if you want to put them there, but I don't think they're quite as powerful, unfortunately, for them as the mighty forces of Zinc, due to that slight less mobility and no magic, though they are really a menace to deal with, and I think they're actually quite a good counter to Zinc in general, and some of the other better factions in the game. Up next, we're going to be taking a look at Senesh. Senesh are one of those factions which you guys have probably seen a little bit less of, but quite a bit of recently, due to the fact that there was an embargo on them. You know, they've been shown off in multiplayer over the last couple of days, and they are disgustingly fast. And in a game mode like Domination, where speed isn't everything, but it is very, very good, of course, to be fast onto objectives, they are rather naughty. They're also one of the only factions which can really attempt to abuse the comeback mechanic quite nicely by not really capping the objectives. Darth Plays has some fantastic videos out actually about kind of the pros and cons of trying those tactics, and often they actually aren't really worth it. But I think Senesh are one of the factions which will be able to pull off kind of not going for the objectives early and just trying to dominate with mobility, moving in these death squads of cavalry, Hellstriders, Fiends of Senesh. They've got some amazing character chariots, and I think when their normal chariots do get debugged, they are a little bit buggy at the moment and don't do that much damage, I think Senesh are going to be even more of a menace to deal with. Lord-wise, big fan of both the Exalted Lord, Inkari, and the Heralds. All of them have a powerful powerful 2 different laws of magic, I think, off the top of my head, that they can bring to the battlefield, and it's rather nasty, of course. Coming in there with the Law of Senesh is pretty damn good, but also you have access to other laws as well, which can do a lot of work. I believe it is Law of Shadows they can bring. Yes, it definitely is. Exalted Lords can go toe-to-toe with most single entities. Apart from Khorne, you kind of want to stay away from them. Being very fast, very mobile, some cost-effective infantry in the form of Marauders. You just swarm your opponent with Marauders, and then you come with the hard-hitting, fast units. And the great thing about Senesh I found is that if I lose the middle early on, a lot of fights kind of tend to go around objective 2 in the start of the game, as it tends to be in the middle of the map. Senesh can bounce back really swiftly, just snappy. Okay, I'm not going to win this. I'm just going to pull all my troops out and flood the flank objectives and react much quicker to my opponents. I also think they're quite a decent faction up against Zinc, which is one of the other strong factions in the game, and that obviously has to count for something. They do have a few counters, though. I think Khorne actually do counter Zinc and Senesh relatively well, but I would argue that Senesh is a bit harder for them. But Senesh, you're going to be going up in the A tier, rocking alongside Zinc. Probably the two most powerful factions in the game, I would think. At least that's what we've done so far in the tier list, but many more factions to come. Up next, let's take a look at the dragon in the room, let's say, which shall be the forces of Cathay. Now, Cathay have come under quite a decent amount of scrutiny as being one of the worst factions I've seen of kind of people coming into chat and explaining, I don't think Cathay's too good, I think they're too weak, or terracottas are OP, so where do they stand? Well, Cathay, I think, perform much better in pitch battles than they do in domination mode. I do think they are the weakest faction in domination, but is that to say they are terrible? Certainly not. We've seen players dominate with Cathay in tournaments, mainly in the form of Inticity, who's kind of been maining them, and he can make them a terror in the night. Terracotta Sentinels are some of the most annoying, oppressive single entities who are unbreakable and just do not die. They also have one of the most powerful lords in the game, the Storm Dragon herself. Coming in with that regrowth, you're almost impossible to kill Terracotta Sentinels if you bring her along with them. Now, this was really problematic when everyone started first playing the game. And they're like, oh, Cathay are actually really solid. But now players have started to realize, okay, you got these big scary single entities. I'm just not going to fight them. I'm just going to ignore them and leave them alone. And I don't really care about them. And that's made Cathay a little bit weaker because people don't have to contest where these Terracotta Sentinels necessarily are. Now, are they useless? Are they down here in F tier? Can you not play them? Absolutely not. When I say they're the weakest faction in the game, it's not by much. It's not like they can lose every single game and against every single faction. I still think they're relatively okay pick against most people, but they're not fantastic against any of them. Their artillery is devastating against several factions, but all the demon factions have relatively swift counters to them, so Ogres and Kislev are probably their better matchups when they can bring the artillery into play. Likewise, their faction mechanic of Harmony is still pretty useful in domination, but really shines way more in pitch battles. So Cathay for me are going to be moving down here to the D tier. Despite having some of the best lords in the game, some of the best single entities, I still think they do struggle a little bit more in this game mode compared to the other factions, but only just, honestly. On another day, they could be a little bit higher, and we'll have to see what you Cathay fans can come up with when the game is launched, because once again, this tier list could be completely mute in a week's time when everyone gets their hands on the game, and people discover new tactics. This is just done from a small pool of players playing games. Up next, let's take a look at the mighty Ogre Kingdoms. You guys haven't seen too much Ogre Kingdom footage so far. I believe there's like one video out by Milk and Cookies kind of showcasing their power. You'll see a lot more of them over the next coming days. In fact, on release of this, maybe you'll see more. Who knows? Ogres are incredibly nasty to deal with. They pack an absolute punch. They're able to absorb a lot of damage and give it back. They have one of the best lords in the game in the form of Scrag the Slaughterer. I don't think the overlord is necessarily as good in this game mode because he's far too slow. The Scrag is incredibly tanky with some fantastic healing and air of effect spell damage, almost like a Miao Ying in a way, but in a much more beautiful, large ogre body. They have Noblars, who are just disgusting at capping objectives because they're so cheap. They're like 200 gold, and Noblar trappers are really sticky and deceptively strong. They can take down hounds quite a bit. Likewise, the Ogres also have the best artillery piece in the game. It is so powerful. I actually forget its name right now, but it's their mobile cannon, and it just deletes infantry. So normally you come up against Khorne. You're like, okay, this is great for Khorne. We'll bring a load of our halberds. No, you won't. They're going to get obliterated by the cannon before they even reach the front line. Lead belchers, again, some of the best long-range pieces, comes in the form of Ogres. And I did not expect that when the game released. I was like, okay, they've got lead belchers, and they have these cannons. I'm sure they'll be decent range, but they're all about getting up there in the enemy face and ripping them to shreds. But alas, no, they have some of the best artillery in the game. It is very scary, particularly the mobile cannon. They have Noblars to swarm. They have the Saber Tusks as well, which are quite quick cavalry, which can counter Fleshhounds relatively decently with their armor piercing. And Gorges are such an awesome unit. Anti-infantry, vanguards, so they can get to the front line quicker, and even better, they have Stalk. They work perfectly with Scrag the Slaughterer, who can heal them up and give them better damage the more kills they get. when they are surrounding him. So Scrag, Gorgers, maybe a Chucker Giant in there to help protect a cannon, some Lead Belchers, and a bucket ton of Noblars, and you will be absolutely fine. Now, they are hard countered by Zinc. I think Zinc, 9 times out of 10, will slaughter Ogres. And that is probably their biggest weakness, is that Zinch have so much firepower they can kind of drag down the Ogres rather quickly. But still, with Saber Tusks and loaded Noblars, it is certainly still possible. And though that is a weak matchup, I am going to be putting Ogres in the A tier alongside Senesh and Zinch. I think they are very, very powerful indeed. And they come with a load of cool units and some great voice acting as well, and that's got to count for something. So up next, I have actually saved my thematically favourite faction to last, which is Kislev. The great bear god looks down upon me, and he shall judge me, depending on where I pit this faction. I think Kislev are pretty damn good. I struggled with them a little bit early on. Boris is kind of this like underdog. He's come from the shadows. Everyone was like, oh, Constantine, he's going to be the best lord. And Boris, bam, out of nowhere, Big B is in town. And I think he gives a lot of durability to Kislev in general. Some fantastic cavalry in the form of Bear Cav. Some relatively decent, cheap-ish infantry troops as well. But they do shine more in the elite department, coming in with the Tsar Guard as well as the Ice Guard, who can be devastating in certain matchups. They slaughter Furies in combat and rain down shots from afar. They really are one of my favorite units. But the reason Kislev, I think, are quite indeed competitive is the war sleds. My god, war sleds are disgusting. In particular, light war sleds. Now, heavy war sleds certainly have their place, but just due to the fact how cheap light war sleds are, how mobile they are, how much they destroy infantry, which is so crucial because, of course, you need to kill enemy infantry fast to get them off objectives. They are really quite nice, and you can do a lot of kiting potential with Kislev, which other factions can't necessarily do with your horse archers alongside those war sleds. Kislev, all around, pretty damn solid. I don't think they have too many terrible matchups for them. Likewise, I don't think they have too many where they are super oppressive or anything like that. So they're going to be a bit worse than Khorne, but I'm still going to pop them in the B tier here. It is very easy to maybe flip them and Nurgle around. All these three factions, I would say, are relatively similar. The B and C tier, whereas A tier, all those factions are relatively similar, and Cathay just a little bit behind, but maybe you can even push them up to C. The awesome thing about this game as well, I've noticed, particularly this game mode, it's relatively well balanced, which is a worrying thing to say about a game with so many factions. People always go on about Total War games like, how on earth are you going to balance this? It's worryingly well done. Like, there's a lot of good balanced factions. Almost every faction has a counter faction as well. So I've been really happy so far playing all of them. I'm certainly worse with Cathay, and that may be why I've put them down in the D tier. Again, this is going to be a biased tier list. I've only played a certain amount of games against a small handful of people, and once you guys get this, this is going to, of course, change completely. Maybe at the end of next week, and be like, oh, Ogres, yep, they're garbage because everyone has this super weapon that can destroy them, and they're going to be down in the F tier, and so on and so on. But this is my early predictions from my experience playing the game at the moment. And yeah, I would like to know your thoughts as well. Do you agree? Do you disagree? As long as you are nice to each other in chat, I would like you guys to, of course, explain what you think is going to be powerful, what you think is going to be weak, and let me know down below what your tier list would be. Thank you so much for the support we've been having over the last couple of weeks. It's been crazy. The channel's grown an absolute ton. Hopefully we can keep that momentum going and grow the Grand Duck Empire, and slowly we shall take down the Landwalkers, take over mankind, and rule it from the power of the mighty ducks. If you guys did enjoy this, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and there's also a bucket ton of links down below in the description to Twitch, Patreon, Discord, all that good stuff, and feel free to comment and all that juiciness. I'm trying to hit, it's almost an impossible mission, I'm afraid. I wanted to try and hit 10k before the release of the game, but, you know, I'd really appreciate if you guys do support and subscribe and all that good stuff, because, you know, it's juicy Total War Warhammer content all the way into the foreseeable future. Until next time, guys, peace, peace, and as always, stay awesome.